All right, hello and welcome to Engineering Ethics at NJIT. I'm your instructor, Daniel Estrada, and this is the Plagiarism Policies video for the course. In this video, I will be going over the plagiarism policy, both the policy in my syllabus, but also the policy at NJIT. I'll go over some basic definitions of plagiarism, all to make sure that you don't plagiarize in your assignments in this class. Hopefully, if you watch this video, you'll have a good understanding both of how my policies work, but also of how I'm thinking about plagiarism, what I'm looking for when I'm catching plagiarism, and this kind of thing. Unfortunately, plagiarism has been an increasingly difficult challenge in this class over the last few years, where I'm regularly catching at least a couple of students in every section of the class, and I teach several sections of engineering ethics, which means every year I'm writing 4 or 5 or even more reports to the Dean of Students recommending students fail the class for plagiarism. And I don't like failing students for plagiarism. I hope that all of my students succeed in the class. Avoiding plagiarism is one of the easiest ways you can succeed. You have to avoid doing something that might be tempting to do, but is going to set you back. I will not hesitate to fail students in my class for plagiarism, and I do it regularly. I've done it with students who are about to graduate but decide to plagiarize multiple assignments in my class. It doesn't make me feel good to do this, but I think it's necessary to keep the standards, some standards for the class, the standards that NJIT expects, some academic rigor, and scholarly integrity for an ethics class. Especially in an ethics class, I feel some obligation to make sure that students are not getting by through plagiarism in this class. Okay, so in this video I'm going to talk about what the plagiarism policy is, both in my syllabus and at NJIT and other definitions. I'm going to talk about what happens when you plagiarize, if I catch you plagiarizing, so you understand exactly the penalties that will incur, and then I'll give a bunch of examples of plagiarism, both from my own courses and from some material I've taken from the internet, where you can get a sense of how I understand what plagiarism is. So I guess I want to start with the NJIT plagiarism policy. This is what all the courses at NJIT, this is the standard that they're held to. The Student Code of Conduct defines plagiarism as using or attempting to use written, oral, graphic work, or graphic work which is authored or prepared by another and submitting it as one's own without appropriate citation and credit. Intentionally or knowingly representing the words or ideas of another as one's own in any academic exercise, copying from a source without quotations or appropriate documentation, copying from any source and altering a word or phrase to avoid exact quotation. So the central idea here is that plagiarism is attempting to use work that you didn't complete yourself, but presenting that work as if it's your own work for credit in a course, for credit on one of the assignments in a course. And that includes both taking material directly, copying and pasting from Wikipedia or whatever, but also paraphrasing, so taking a material from some source and then changing a few of the words or changing some of the sentence structure, maybe deleting some sentences or adding a few sentences in between in order to avoid exact quotation, and so that it doesn't look like you're just taking it from online. So all of these count as plagiarism according to the NJIT Student Code of Conduct. Just to simplify this a little bit, the core of plagiarism is taking material from other sources and presenting it as if it's your own work. So there's two parts to this. It's work that's not your original work, but it's presented as if it's your original work. So sometimes it's okay to use work that's not your original work. For instance, when you're quoting some source, if there's some passage in one of the readings that you really like, you want to talk about that quote, go ahead and quote it. Put it in quotes. That's fine. This is why it's green on this list, because it is okay to use quotes in your material. That is not your original work, but it's okay to use it as long as you clearly indicate that it's not your original work. The problem with plagiarism is when you're using material from other sources, but you're presenting it as if it's your own work that you're trying to get credit for. Right? So work that's not original to you, that you're paraphrasing or copying from some other source, that you're not putting in quotes or you're not giving proper citations, and you're presenting it in your own work, maybe seamlessly integrating into your own work to make it seem as if this is work that you completed, when in fact you did not. There's one complication here to talk about if you've taken this class in previous semesters and maybe you've had to retake it for whatever reason. I'll talk about the case of using your own work from previous semesters. Also maybe your own work from other classes that you've taken. I'll talk about that later. So if it's not your own work, you have to sort it, properly cite it, and put quotes around it, and otherwise clearly indicate the work that you did yourself versus the work that you've taken from other sources. So if you want to avoid plagiarism, just indicate any material that you've taken from other sources. When you use quotes, I suggest you use quotes sparingly, but it's okay to use quotes. But when you do use quotes, put it in double quotes. Make it absolutely clear to the reader that this is information taken from other sources. Clearly distinguish any material that you wrote yourself from material that you've taken from other sources. That means double quotes around any text taken directly from other sources, but also if you're just paraphrasing or if you're using information that you've taken from other sources without directly quoting it, make sure you cite that information. Don't paraphrase directly, and when I'm thinking about paraphrasing, I'm thinking about when you have the reading maybe open in front of you here, and then you're writing your essay, and you're basically reading a line in the reading, and then you're sort of copying that line, or maybe the meaning of that line, maybe changing a few words, but that you're going sort of line by line to put the texts from the readings into, or from some other source that you found into your assignments. Right? That kind of paraphrasing is very common, and it counts as plagiarism. It counts as using material that is not your own work. So don't do that. I strongly recommend that when you're writing your essays, when you're preparing your essays by reading the materials, go ahead and read the material. Read the material, take notes. If there's quotes that you want to use in your work, or you might want to use, write those quotes down in your notes. And then I recommend that when you're actually writing your essay, you put the source materials aside, and then you write your essay from your notes. If you're using quotes that you have written down, you can cite those as you're writing, but otherwise everything is going to be your own words. And if you put the source material away, if you're not directly copying and pasting either line by line as you're transcribing, or directly copying and pasting from a website, if you're not doing that, then it's very difficult for you to plagiarize. It's very difficult for you to match the word structure and the sentence structure of the source material that you're using. Okay. So let me talk a little bit more deeply about citations and quotations. So this is how you clearly indicate that the material is not your own, and I've got a couple of sort of made-up examples here. But one of the rules that's discussed in the syllabus is that if you're quoting from material that I've made available in the reading list, in the required reading list, then you can refer to that by the author's name and maybe the page number if it's one of the longer documents. So for instance, there's a reading from Turing, and Turing asks the question, can machines think? And his response to that is that the question is too meaningless to deserve discussion. So here I say that Turing answers this question with this phrase. I put that phrase in double quotes, and then I cite Turing in parentheses after the quote, the author's name and the page number that it's on. Right, so this is a good citation. I've made clear that the phrases here that I'm talking about are attributed to some other author, and I've put it in double quotes, and I've given the appropriate citation. So this is a basic example. If you're using material that I've made available, this is all you need, the author's name and the page number. You don't need to give the full citation because it should be clear from that lesson what readings you're talking about. There's only a small number of readings from those lessons. So this is enough. Maybe this is a place to say that part of the point of these citation practices is to make clear to your reader where you're getting your information from. So because we're all in the same class, all reading the same material every week, it should be clear to everyone in that discussion section where that material is coming from. Even if they didn't read that particular paper for that lesson, they should know that that's where that material came from because it's in the reading list. So if it's material that we've already made available in class, then the author's name and page number is enough. That should be sufficient to make everyone in class aware of where that information came from. If you're using in class material from other sources that I did not make available myself in the reading list, then give it a citation. If it's just a website, it might be enough to just give a link to that website. You don't need to give the full citation. The discussion sections are a little bit of an informal discussion. The important point to avoid the plagiarism penalties is that you're properly attributing any information that you have, and then you're making it easy for your readers to inspect that information. So, For instance, just two quick examples, I might say in my essay, for whatever reason, that according to Wikipedia, Joe Biden was born in 1942. It's clear that I'm getting this information from Wikipedia, and then maybe in the endnotes, I leave a link to Wikipedia. This is enough of a citation where I know where you're getting that information, and I can easily inspect it for myself. This is everything that I need as a reader to understand what you're doing and how you know what you say you know. Here's another way of doing the same thing. I might say that Biden is born in 1942 and then just put in parentheses in Wiki. So one way is talking explicitly about the source as part of the prose of your essay. But the other way is just saying the fact and then saying where you got the fact. Here, Wiki is just in parentheses. This tells you the source. And then in the endnotes, there's a link to Wikipedia. When I say in the endnote, I mean, you write your post and then at the bottom of the post, put your sources. And it should be clear from this information. Right, these two sentences are saying the same thing. There are different ways of citing or different ways of indicating that you got this information from somewhere else. But in both cases, it's clear that this information was taken from some other source, and what that source was, and your reader can easily inspect it. So this kind of thing should work for any website or article that you read or you find. If necessary, you can give a more elaborate citation in your endnotes, but as long as it's clear the information that you've taken from other sources, that you're giving them proper credit, you're helping your reader understand your sources, where you're getting your information from. That's what's important. If the source that you're using is not an online source, if it's not something that I can click a link to get to a website, then you probably want to give a more complete citation so that your readers know how to find that material. If you have a book on your bookshelf, that happens to be relevant to the discussion, but maybe it's a book that most people don't have, you probably want to provide a full citation. My preference and what I recommend is doing APA-style citations. This is just what I'm familiar with. If you're familiar with a different citation style, use the citation styles that you're familiar with. As long as you're consistent in your work, as long as your citations all look clear and readable and your readers can understand where you're getting your information from, then that's fine. Just be consistent in your citation style. I'm not going to be picky over the details, that all the commas and semicolons are in the right place. I'm just looking to make sure that you're properly attributing material that you did not yourself do. So the APA style is the one where it's the author name first, and then the year in parentheses, and then the title of the work and the source, maybe the publisher or maybe the journal that it's in or whatever. This is maybe like a rough outline of the APA style. If you want some different style, again, go ahead and use the style that you're comfortable with as long as you're consistent. But whatever style you use, it should have at least this much information. It should have the author's name, the year it was written, the title of the piece, and where it was published. Again, this is information that's necessary for your readers to track down your sources. There will be a more elaborate citation exercise in the research project in weeks 10 and 11 in this class. And there I'm asking for a full bibliography with complete citations and annotations. And I'll explain that research project in that lesson. But apart from that research project, this citation policy should suit you for whatever material that you're using. Notice, just real quick before I move on here, notice that in both of these quotes taken, in both of this material taken from Wikipedia, it is properly cited. I'm going to say this is, my policy is that these are complete citations, but nothing was quoted. So this is not a quote from Wikipedia. This is not quoting in double quotes some sentence that was taken from Wikipedia. This sentence, maybe I didn't read it that closely, but I don't think the sentence is actually said in Wikipedia, but the information is there. It has Joe Biden's birth date, it has how old he is, and so I can take that information even though I'm not quoting it. But I am using information that I got from this source, and so I'm citing that source here. It's absolutely necessary that you provide citations for quotes that you use to attribute to that material, but you should also provide citations for any information that you get from any other source, some factual information, for instance, like the year that Biden was born. In both of these cases, I'm not quoting that source, but I'm still using information that I found in that source, and so it still deserves a citation here. Okay. So let me go over a couple of mistakes that are very common, that happen regularly in the semester, so I can anticipate a lot of the issues that might come up. So the examples in the next few slides are all from my most recent summer semester, that these are students in different sections in the summer, but who were found plagiarizing. Very common to see is citing facts and figures, especially from Wikipedia or other online encyclopedias. I think this one was taken from Britannica.com. And again, the issue is not that you're taking information from other sources, but that it's not being properly cited and identified as material that's not your own work. So if you look at this essay, and this is the output from Turnitin, you look at this essay, the highlighted bits are all the parts that Turnitin suspected of plagiarism. And the issue for this slide is this second passage here, which is a long passage, almost 4 full lines long, with a bunch of facts and figures, but none of it is cited. So in this case, the student did not cite Britannica, which is where this information came from. In fact, this whole sentence is copied and pasted directly from Britannica. So it's not cited in the text. Britannica is also not cited in the endnotes. There's no reference at all to Britannica, even though this information clearly came from that website. When students are caught with this kind of plagiarism, so this counts as plagiarism. This is taking material that is not your own work and presenting it as if it's your own. In particular, what's important here is not just that they've taken 4 lines of text from another source, but that information is sort of seamlessly woven into their own essay to present it as if it's their own work, and it's just not. When students are caught in this sort of mistake, one typical justification is that, well, look, these are just the facts. How can I present, the number of feet beneath the surface? How could I have presented that any other way? This kind of excuse just doesn't fly. Please don't offer this. If you offer this kind of excuse, then I know that you haven't watched this video. But there are several problems with this. First, the biggest problem is that, look, even if it is just facts and figures, you could have put it in double quotes and properly attributed that work to the proper author, but instead you presented it as if it's your own work. The problem here is not that you're using those facts and figures. The problem is that you presented it as if it was your own work when it's not. So you're not going to get credit on that. That's what plagiarism is. But another thing is that as the author of your assignment, you have choices over what to present and how to present information. Why does it matter how many feet below the surface that the Deepwater Horizon oil spill happened? Why do you have to do it in both feet and meters? These are choices that the original author made, and you're just taking those choices as if they're not choices at all. This is not only is this plagiarism, but it's clear that you're not engaged in the material, that you're not actually thinking about what information to present or not to present. You're just taking information and presenting it. Again, this is not you doing your own work. This is you taking the work of others and presenting it as your own. That's what makes plagiarism. Right, if you don't know how to present this information in some other way, either quote it directly or ask yourself, why do I need to present this information at all? Is that information actually important and central to your discussion? These are choices that you have to make for yourself. If you're not making this, if you're not making these choices, if you're just taking this material from other sources, that's just plagiarism. It's just you not doing your work, so you're not going to get credit. Here's a slightly more difficult example. This is another long passage quoted from a source. Here, the highlighted number 1 passage here. Is all taken directly from one of the sources. Part of the issue, though, is that the student does have that source in their citations here. So this passage comes from this Investopedia.com website. Investopedia.com website is not going to be a very high-quality website. I can already tell from the research here that this is a sort of a poorly researched and low-effort essay. But the problem is not just that the sources are bad, but that a big component of the essay is taken directly from that source, right? So almost this full paragraph is taken from that source directly, just several lines of text. So the fact that this source is put in the citations and the references is it's a good thing, but it's not enough to get this out of plagiarism. The problem with plagiarism is taking material that is not your own and presenting it as if it's your own work. So putting the reference down here is really meant to disguise the fact that a lot of the material came just directly copied and pasted from that website. So this is also the kind of thing that Turnitin will find on a regular basis. There's nothing in the text itself. My head is covering a little bit of it, but there's nothing in the text itself that provides a citation or any indication that this material was taken from some other source. It's presented as if this is written by the author of this assignment, when in fact it's not written by the author at all. It's written by this website. So the problem here is not that the citation doesn't exist. The problem here is that the material is not clearly distinguished from the author's own work. It's presented as if it's part of the essay. And again, this is what counts as plagiarism. Presenting material that's not your own, as if it were your own, is plagiarism. Again, this kind of plagiarism could be avoided by explicitly quoting this text, putting in quotes and saying, according to the website Investopedia. But the student here clearly is not just trying to cite the facts here. The student is also clearly trying to buffer the word count in their essay. So again, I should make it absolutely clear that quoted material does not count towards your word count. You have to write 350 original words. So if you use a 150 word quote, then you have to write 350 words on top of that. So part of the problem here is that even if this was properly cited, why is the student using such a long quote in an essay that should be their own words? Right. So this is not just a problem of citation, but even if it were just a problem of citation, it shows low effort and an attempt to make the quote count for the student's essay. The fact that it wasn't properly quoted and cited is not accidental. This is deliberate, because this is clearly a case of cheating, a case of plagiarism. One more example. Here's an example with a long quote that is properly cited. You can see here the student says, agreeing with this is Patrick Lynn, author of Why Ethics Matters for Autonomous Cars, who states, and then there's this quote. But you can see this quote goes all the way down to here. So this is, again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines of text in their short 350-word essay. 7 lines of it were taken from this quote. So this is not, so just to be clear, this is not plagiarism. This is properly cited. It's clear that this long quote here is taken from another source. The student also included material that was not directly cited. And actually, I'm just noticing this now. This might be a candidate for plagiarism. I think in this case, I did talk to the student about the issue here. This might not be plagiarism. This might be properly cited, but it is still excessive quotation. And this is a case where the bulk of the student's essay is not their own words, but it's the words of someone else. More than a third of the essay. The essay has a little bit above this and a little bit below this, but more than a third of the essay is just this one quote taken from the text. And the essay was right at the word count, the minimum word count. So this kind of work will not count as violating the plagiarism policy, but it will count as not doing the assignment. The assignment is to write in your own words. If quotes take up the bulk of your essay, that's not writing in your own words. The word count of those quotes don't count towards your minimum word count in the posts or replies. This also includes when you quote material from the student that you're replying to in your replies. Those quotes do not count towards your word count and will count against your word count. You will get reminded of the plagiarism policy if you do this, and you likely won't get credit on these assignments if quotes are taking up the majority of your posts. Okay, so let me say just a few things about, I have a couple more examples to go through, but let me just say a few things about the specific syllabus policy in my classes. So the general syllabus policy is to make sure that students are getting credit for work that they themselves completed. Violations of the plagiarism policy are for when students are attempting to get credit for material that they did not themselves complete, either by not giving it proper citation or quotation, or otherwise indicating the work that is not their own. So in my class, students are required to submit their assignments to the plagiarism detection software. The plagiarism detection software is due when the replies are due for that lesson. So for lesson 1 is due on Friday, and then the replies are due the following Tuesday. On that Tuesday at midnight, you should also submit your plagiarism detection for lesson 1. So that includes your lesson 1 post and your lesson 1 replies. Make sure that you are submitting only your posts and replies. Don't submit the posts and replies of other students, because that'll mess up the plagiarism detection software. And I'm interested in your material for your plagiarism detection and not the material from other students. If you are determined to violate the plagiarism policy, and let me also make clear here that Turnitin is not the thing that catches students plagiarize. I'm the person that catches students plagiarizing, and I catch them by reviewing the Turnitin reports. And the Turnitin reports, as we saw in these previous slides, the Turnitin reports will highlight material that looks suspicious, and it will also tell you a percentage of the overall work that is suspicious in this way. So what I do is I look at that percentage, and really anything over 10%, and in the first couple of weeks of the class, I look at anything over 5% that is not your own material. This will cause me to look at the report, but nothing that the plagiarism detection report tells me will necessarily commit you to plagiarism. There have been cases where the plagiarism detection report comes up as like 40% not original material, but when I look at it, and in fact the material that is taken from other sources is all properly quoted and cited, and the student wrote enough of their own material to meet the requirements, and there's nothing wrong. So the plagiarism detection report might come back as if there's things that are concerning, but when I look at it, I might determine that there's nothing wrong. And that happens quite often. So the important thing here is that don't just be concerned about what the plagiarism detection report is saying in terms of the raw number. That number is just giving me an indication to look more closely. And then I will look at the report in detail and determine whether I think that the plagiarism policy has been violated. If I do think the plagiarism policy has been violated, that assignment gets 0 credit, and I will send you a warning about the plagiarism policy along with that 0 credit. That warning usually comes in the Canvas feedback in grades under the rubric. So I will give you feedback that you violated the plagiarism policy. You will earn 0 credit on that assignment, and you can't make that credit up. So you can't redo the assignment without the plagiarism violation. If you violate the plagiarism policy at all, that's your first violation. You get 0 credit on that assignment. And also, you lose all extra credit opportunities for the semester. So there's several extra credit opportunities for the semester. There are the peer reviews, there are the engineering ethics memes, there are a couple of extra credit essays that I allow students to write. All of that adds up to something like 75 points in the class. And that's enough to make up a missing lesson, some assignments that you didn't do so well on. But if you are found plagiarizing, you lose all of those opportunities for extra credit. So you can't make up your lost points by redoing the assignment, and you can't make up those lost points with any extra credit because you lose all extra credit opportunities. This together ends up being a fairly big impact on a student's grade. This policy is more or less designed so that students who violate the plagiarism policy end up losing a full letter grade. So if you were going to get an A, but then you're caught plagiarizing, losing those extra credit opportunities and getting 0 credit on that assignment will tip most students down below the A to a B plus or a B. It's very difficult to get an A in the class after you've been caught plagiarizing. It has happened in the past, but it's not very easy. And this is by design. It should not be easy for students to get an A in this class when they've been found plagiarizing. So this is the penalty on the first violation of plagiarism. Repeated violations of the plagiarism policy, or particularly egregious cases, will be recommended to the Dean of Students to fail the class. So this is the Dean of Students policy. Is that cases of plagiarism are sent to the Dean of Students. I have this initial warning of a violation of the policy so that I'm not sending students to the Dean of Students directly on the first violation. First violation results in the penalty on the grade. And any further violations, I will just fail you from the class. I will send you, so the Dean of Students policy is that we send plagiarizing cases to the Dean of Students so that they can review with supporting material. I will send, along with the report, I will send the Turnitin report that documents the plagiarism. And I'll sort of explain what happens. Usually I will meet with students before I send it off to the Dean of Students. Dean of Students will also meet with you upon getting my report. And one of the purposes of sending to the Dean of Students is in case this is a repeated problem for students. So students who are already found plagiarizing in other courses, when I find them plagiarizing, that's usually enough for the Dean of Students to expel students from the program, to expel students from the college. Repeated instances of plagiarism across multiple classes is very clearly a violation of the NJIT policy, and students will get kicked out for that. If it's your first time violating a plagiarism policy in class, if it's your first time failing a student, the Dean of Students will usually just take note of who you are, will remind you of the plagiarism policy, and that's a serious case. Sometimes you go on academic probation after a plagiarism policy, especially if your grades are not so good. And then you're sort of on the dean's watch list. If further instances of plagiarism come up, then that's grounds for expulsion. So part of the point of sending you along to the Dean of Students is to coordinate with the Dean of Students and make sure that these the repeat offenders are properly dealt with. It's a serious issue for the integrity of the school. It's a serious issue for the integrity of the classes, that these classes are graded fairly, that the students who pass these classes are legitimately doing their own work and receiving credit for work that they do. So the plagiarism policy here is, in some ways, I think of it as lenient. I know that that instructors who were here when I first started teaching at NJIT had a zero tolerance policy that the first instances of plagiarism would result in failing the class. Right. So giving this warning where you might drop a letter grade is already, I think, a lenient step for plagiarism. And as I said earlier, especially for an ethics class, I don't feel bad making sure that students are keeping to some minimal ethical standards by not plagiarizing. Let me talk a little bit about self-plagiarism. If you've taken this course before, you might have a couple of essays that you've already completed. My official policy is that if you've taken this course before, you might have learned something before, but I want you to complete this course again. So my official policy is that you must rewrite all of the material for this class. It's certainly the case that I want you to rewrite all of your replies. You can use work that you've completed in the sense that notes that you've taken, topics that you've written about before, maybe the case study for your research project. You can use the same research that you've done in previous semesters, but I'd like you to do your writing assignments from scratch. Now that's my preference. Maybe you think that's unfair. The way that I'm going to do this for students who have taken this class before, if you submit work from previous semesters, I'm going to consider that low effort, and I'm going to give it a maximum of 20 out of 30 points, which is the grade that I give for low effort work. If you refuse to do this material again, you're just going to get a point penalty on these assignments, but I won't count that as plagiarism for your posts. For your replies, they must be original. I guess I won't count it as a plagiarism violation if you submit replies, but I just won't give you credit for them. Self-plagiarism is plagiarism, and in the real world, people have been caught self-plagiarizing, especially publishing multiple books where large sections of new books are just taken directly from old books. That kind of stuff is plagiarism. You can get blacklisted from your field, from your discipline for doing this kind of stuff. You can get in real trouble from this kind of plagiarism. And part of the idea of the engineering ethics course is that you can learn these ethical lessons now before you go into the real world. So hopefully catching people for plagiarism now prevents them from making bigger mistakes later on in their career, where things are more important than just a grade on an assignment. I want to close quickly with some examples from this website. This website is the University of Wisconsin Madison Writing Center. They have a really nice resource about what paraphrase is and what plagiarism is and how to avoid plagiarism, and they give some very good examples. I'm not going to read through these examples in complete detail, but I just want to sort of highlight this so that you can look at this. The link is in these slides, and this link is also in the syllabus, so you can read through this website. It's got a lot more information, but I just want to pull this out just to say a few more words about what is legitimate and illegitimate paraphrase. So on this website, they give one of these examples where here's the original source from Chase 1995, talking about nurses in critical care. So this is the original source. So they give an example of word-for-word plagiarism, and you can see here all of these underlined. Again, you don't have to read everything. You can look at this in more detail on your own. But all of these underlined passages are passages that are taken directly from the original source. So you can see that most of this essay is taken from the original source. There are a few changes in words, a few shifts in word order. There are some things that the author of this passage did that was not in the original. But most of it, the vast majority, over 80% of the words in this new paragraph are directly taken from the original. Not only are the specific words and phrases taken from the original, but also the word order, right? So it starts with the same sentence. The presentation of the material in this passage exactly mirrors the original passage, right? So this is not only borrowed some of the information from this passage, but a significant amount of the paragraph itself is taken from the original. This is almost copied and pasted with just some slight modification. I think everyone understands why this is plagiarism, why this would count as a violation of the plagiarism policy. Slightly more difficult is these patchwork paraphrases, and this is something that I will often catch students on in my classes. Patchwork paraphrases, you can see here this paragraph has a lot fewer passages underlined. There are some underlined passages, these phrases that are taken directly from the original, right? The critical care nurses function in a hierarchy of roles, function in a hierarchy, etc. So the passages are taken, but it's not just the percentage of the original that matters for an illegitimate paraphrase or for plagiarism, right? So if we just look at the number of underlined words, maybe 15 or 20% of this passage is taken from the original. But it's not just the particular phrases that are copied and pasted from the original. It's also, again, the presentation. So all of the information that's presented in this paragraph are taken directly from this paragraph on a line-by-line basis. It's basically the lines are simplified and sort of rewritten, but presented here. This is also plagiarism. This is not an original writing. This is not an original paragraph. The words, but also the presentation, the order of the sentences, the way that the information is being presented is all taken directly from the original. Notice in the patchwork paraphrase right here at the front, it says Chase 1995. So in some sense, they are attributing to the original author, but they're not making clear that all of these passages are taken from the original author. They're just saying, they're suggesting that the information is taken from the original author, but in fact, the entire paragraph structure, including many of the key phrases, are taken from the original, and that's not clearly indicated in this paragraph. Right, so this also counts as plagiarism, and this is the kind of plagiarism, this kind of patchwork plagiarism, is the sort that I'm very frequently finding students in my classes committing. The legitimate paraphrase, the way of doing this correctly is to not take the material from the original. So you can see here, the source is attributed, and when there's a phrase taken from the original, that phrase is also properly attributed in double quotes with a page number. But everything else in this paragraph is original. The presentation of information is unique. The emphasis in this paragraph is unique. Clearly the information is taken from the original source, but is rewritten, not just rewritten, but it's reconceptualized into this paragraph. So this is a legitimate paraphrase. There should be no indicators that significant things came from the original source unless they're properly cited. And again, the way that you make sure that you get something like this is by reading through the source material, taking notes on the source material, and then putting the source material away and writing your own essay from your notes. If you're writing from your notes, from your own thoughts, it's almost impossible, a probability of nearly zero, that you write the exact same sentences and phrases and sentence structure, paragraph structure, as they appear in the original source. It's almost impossible. Language is too productive. The combinatorial options are too many for plagiarism to happen when you're just writing from your own thoughts. The way that patchwork plagiarism like this happens is when you're taking the original and just transcribing sentence by sentence into your own essay. And that's almost always going to result in plagiarism. Don't do that, and you will stay clear of this plagiarism policy. All right, so that's the plagiarism policy. I hope that makes sense. I hope you all understand better what I'm looking for with the plagiarism policy, how to avoid violating the plagiarism policy, and what the penalties will be should you be found violating the plagiarism policy. Good luck in the class. Hope this information is not relevant to you, but now there's no excuse for not understanding the policy. All right.